What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Stereotherapy. I'm your host, Lisa, and this is episode 102. Today in the show, I was joined by Gabe Woodrow. It was really cool because I found him on TikTok. That's what was so cool. So I got to connect with Gabe before the holidays, and my internet pal, Klaus, was really awesome because he was always in my DMs like, Gabe, 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 when I would post about, hey, I'm looking for people. And that's what's really cool about the sense of community in this podcast, that people are leading me to people that would be awesome guests, and they are. So I have to start listening to you guys for sure and all of that anytime you're in my messages. But I sat down with Gabe. We talked all about the Baltimore music scene. We talked about how working with Ace Enders and how that almost full circle moment and being a fan. And I know Justine and I know firsthand about what that's like. And it's an amazing thing. So to get to hear from him what that was like, we talk about Live, Laugh, Toaster Bath. And we also dive into Gabe's mental health and how music has been an aid to that. And I want to thank Gabe for being so open in his mental health because I know so many people it will help. He shares a lot of things that I'm sure were not easy to talk about, but I really appreciate that there was that trust to open up because I know someone out there will resonate. I know I did. So I know you guys will. And Gabe is just awesome. He's an awesome person. So I would love to push more people his way. So let's just get into it. Here is my conversation with Gabe Woodrow. First of all, like, again,
Let me.
thank you for wanting to come on. Like, this is so cool because I've heard your name and I've seen you on TikTok and I was like, oh, but the holidays are now. I can't ask him now. I have to wait.
That's so awesome that you found me on there. I didn't really get into that platform much when I first started putting music out, mainly because I just did not know what I was doing.
Hmm.
But over the past, I'd say year, I've had a lot of really cool responses, and I met a lot of people at shows that found me off of that platform, and that was just like kind of mind blowing. Mainly like when I went out to, you know, the West Coast and played, or just different cities in general, and got away from Maryland and things like that. It's the response to that has been really awesome. I just didn't expect that.
Yeah, and as much as people too want to, and I get it, even in the beginning, I was very like, oh, I'm never going to join TikTok. I don't want to do TikTok. It's dancing videos. But then once I
Yeah,
dove into it, I was like, wow, like the main, like people finding people like you and other bands I've found, or also just like music fans or people that want to talk about mental health. It was like you could hit so much, so many more people through TikTok because again, like I know people they have their views on it. I know it's supposedly maybe going away now, which is a whole other thing, but
yeah,
it's just I feel like it's been so great and I hear so many people say what you kind of just said where when they go to other places out of their music scene, out of their state even, there's people there that want to see them sometimes because of TikTok. And I think
yeah.
that's so cool to hear. It's been so good. So I hope somehow, some way, like I don't know, it sticks around somehow in the 11th hour, like whatever, because I think it's been so great.
It's definitely a bummer because I made a lot of friends and fans off of that platform that maybe don't go to Instagram or
Mhm.
whatever. But yeah, I hope it doesn't necessarily go away because it has been a really good tool for artists like myself. And I can probably speak for a bunch of bands that are in my scene that we've had different success off of different platforms, which is really cool. But if it goes away, that's like, oh man.
Yeah, because I know much people are like, oh, we'll just go to Instagram. But I myself know and see that Instagram, unless you're paid a boost or this or
Yeah,
verified, whatever it is, you really don't, or unless you really, I guess, hit that right hashtag, it's difficult even for me. And it's like, what
yeah,
do you do? Where TikTok, you post, and then even if it's 200 views or whatever, I think about, wow, if 200 people were in a room and they viewed whatever I had, that's
yeah,
amazing. Like that's 200 eyes that may go to Spotify and click on your music or whatever anyone's promoting. And yeah, somehow we got to figure it out. I don't know what's going to happen and maybe people will go to Instagram more. I don't know. I feel for musicians and for people that found something like that in that outlet of TikTok and then you got to figure it out yet again. So,
yeah. And you can totally relate to it because you're a creator yourself, and being in that same realm, it's very hard. The
hmm.
only people that necessarily run after new music are people a lot like myself, and it's
Hmm.
funny because when you're putting music out and branching out and playing shows and trying to get into different regions and things like that, your biggest fans are musicians. Uh,
Hmm.
maybe some other bands or artists don't recognize that, but I definitely do. And those guys are kind of what help guide you to other ears and things of that nature. What I really loved about TikTok was seeing that people were putting my music on different videos that they were making, and I was like blown away at that. That's just one of the coolest things ever
Hmm.
to see a response from any song. But yeah, I don't want that to go away. That's a bummer because that one means that something is resonating with people, and also at the same time, like you said, even if you get a couple hundred views on a video or something, that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
it's hard. It is very difficult. I've had numerous videos that I put on TikTok that did thousands and thousands of views, and I'm like, what? I did nothing different than anything I did previously. I just try to be myself in all honesty and hope that maybe somebody's ears are like listening. That's
Mhm.
all you can do, really.
And you see that. I was just talking with Nick of the band Never Home over the weekend, and we were talking about that, and we hope like maybe this year or years to come, more of the genuine artist win. You know, the ones that are talking about these real things and are authentic and almost like, hey, maybe if TikTok goes away, for whatever reason on Instagram, people will search for artists like you that they can tell, like, hey, they're one really feeling what they're singing and they're putting this genuine, real music out there. And that's what we want versus the, here's a showy reel that may get a lot of views, which not to knock anyone, like that's hard work. I can't do that. I'll be the first to admit I'm not good at it. But
Feel
I
you.
think I would love to see that too, an artist like yourself. And that's why like I love that this podcast is that because I'm so thankful for any artist, but also thankful for artists like yourself, where it's like, I want to boost that. I want to boost these people that are out there where I can tell and it catches my ear of like, that's authentic. Like, they're talking about real things we all go through. So I appreciate artists like you and any artist I've ever had on here.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on, by the way. I'm super thankful for every opportunity I get to either discuss music or endeavors or what have you. I love meeting new people. It's one of my favorite things about writing and playing music. So thank you so much. Seriously.
Oh yeah. And I mean, a big question that we always start with and we ask everybody is what are those first memories of falling in love with music? Because I know your dad, in doing a little bit of research, I know your dad played a big role in inspiring you, and I know he's a musician himself. So I think growing up in that house, I can't imagine what that was like and being around music. Would you say some of those first memories involved your dad in many ways?
Absolutely. That's really cool that you found that. My dad would be smiling big. He's still a rock star, and my dad is pushing 70 years old, and he still plays in three bands, cover bands, and he gets after it. It's pretty impressive. When I was just I could tell when I was little how much music was going to mean to me. I really just knew immediately because of how much my dad listened to stuff and was playing and gigging and things like that. I just was one of those people that always had music on, regardless of what I was doing. I could have been playing baseball out in the front yard, and I would find a way to jump out on the roof with an extension cord and put a CD in the CD player so that I
Hmm.
had music. But when I was younger and dad was always playing, anything from like Van Halen or AC/DC and things like that. I was just so drawn to it. Drums, loud guitars. And
Hmm.
then when we would go camping and things like that, Pop would pull out an acoustic guitar and I fell in love with that and the fact that you could just take it anywhere and write and just be creative. Yeah, he's definitely a big influence in what I've been doing and I'm super thankful for him, that's for sure.
I can't imagine, and that's so cool because obviously mine was different. My parents didn't do music, but they loved music. So there was the records, like finding again, much like AC/DC, Van Halen, Meatloaf, Nirvana, everything that was I could find. And I think that's so cool to hear when I was learning that about you. It was like that has to be so just amazing almost now because I know you've shared the stage with him. He's been on the stage with you. I don't know, maybe once or twice. So like how did that feel to then now be playing your music and then having your dad join you?
It's an incredible thing. Recently, I played a show in Baltimore, at Power Plant Live, and I had the idea of bringing him up for one of my songs. That was like probably one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced so far, just because there's been times where like I've played some covers with Dad in
Hmm.
years past. He'd bring me on like one of his shows or something and be like, "Oh, well, play Bon Jovi with me," or like one of Dead or Alive on acoustic, and I'm like, "Okay." So we did some different things over the years together, and now that I have a lot more time and a lot more goal driven with everything with my music, being able to pull him into what I've been doing is pretty awesome. The smile on his face when he was
Hmm.
singing my song made me want to cry.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
was so awesome.
yeah, when I saw, I was just like, this is so cool. I want to touch on that for sure. And we also, music scenes is a huge thing we touch on because everyone I've had on, whether it's West Coast, East Coast, over, or just I've had some people that, are in a state that maybe people wouldn't think, like, oh, okay, like places like a small town in Texas that they would think, oh, like, it's probably all country. And even me, I had to check myself and be like, wait, it's not just all country. Like, that's kind of me judging that from what I've think of Texas, right? And I think it's so
Yeah,
cool. And I'm lucky where originally from the Midwest, I had Chicago's and now I have New Jersey's. So I'm like, oh, I'm kind of spoiled there. But for
it's
you,
awesome.
what is so special about your music scene and just being in Maryland? What is so important to you?
One thing I've noticed that in Maryland is that it is much, much smaller compared to something like Philly or
Mhm.
Jersey, at least in my opinion. I've been pretty fortunate to meet and talk with some of the good bands that come out of Baltimore, like the guys in Have Mercy. They've
Mhm.
been really cool to me, and I that's one of my favorite bands in the scene, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
But it's just cool. I just try to be a part of the community in it. I want to see people do cool things. I've said this before. I don't care about a following. I'm really big on community. I truly believe that if I'm doing my part and trying to bring people up and help others and many different ways, that good things are going to happen, whether that's playing to a bunch of people at a show or whatever. I've had so many messages from people that hit me up over me putting out a song, and I'm just like in awe. And a
Mhm.
lot of it is from the Baltimore scene. Even though I'm not necessarily from Baltimore, I just kind of assume that as my home base, if you will. I'm actually equal distance from Philly and Baltimore, so I'm like sandwiched in between the two.
Mhm.
I'm very close to Delaware. And for the most part, at least for where I live, we don't really have a music scene, and what we do is covers with country and classic rock. And I just really want to try to be a part of growing the artists and the bands that are coming out of Baltimore and even Philly too. Like I try to divert both of my paths to both those areas just because I'm there all the time. I go to shows almost every single week. But Baltimore is tricky. To me, I just don't feel like there's a lot of things going away. Like Rams Head now is closing down, which is
Mhm.
such a bummer. Or maybe it has closed already. I believe it did. And that was like I'm sure one of our favorite spots to go. It's pretty much like the only uh, big venue, I guess, outside a soundstage. But they were so close, but so different at the same time. It's tricky. I'd like to see the scene be a little more uplifting, if I'm being honest, and not so much competition. I don't really jive with that. That's not my jam.
Mhm.
I want to see people do cool things, and if somebody gets an opportunity that I didn't get, that's awesome.
Mhm.
I just want to be happy for them. I see a lot where the competition thing seems to be a dagger, and I don't really love that, to be quite honest. I know it happens everywhere, but and it's all learning, but at the same time, I'm like, nah.
Mhm. I'm with you in that in a different way where I've had a couple people say that same thing. And a lot of the bands, get a lot of bands from Pittsburgh. And I love that somehow I've become in that little scene from having
How
one
cool is
on.
that?
Oh, it is wild. Like I'll have like first had Old Neon and then from Old Neon it was Main Street Detour. And then from there it was I mean I could name them all like Dream the Heavy. Like I've had so many of them And for me, what I've noticed, at least for me, and no dig if anyone from back home is listening to this, but like what you were touching on about the competition, that's what I felt like, at least for me in Chicago. There was a lot of competition where if someone did get that opportunity or did get that show, or even doing a podcast or an interview thing, if you got that big interview and someone else didn't. And when I moved here to New Jersey, it was very different. I am so supported. The music scene, at least where I am in Central Jersey, the bands that I've had on are constantly like, hey, like, let me help you. Here's what we do, or and just the support is crazy. And I think finding that, at least for me, and I know maybe anyone listening may think, oh, it's not like that. But for me personally, being here, I don't think I would have thrived as much if I was still in Chicago because the scene here is just people have been so helpful. And it's so important in a music scene to have that and to have people, again, like support you. And that idea of community over followers is like our number one thing. Like, I would rather have that community versus like 10,000 followers. I really would. And I know people don't
I
believe that,
agree.
but it's even with like, we just had the Anthony Green episode and immediately people are like, "Oh, your followers, I'm sure this." I didn't care about any of that. For
Right.
me, it
You
was,
had an awesome discussion with a legend.
like for me, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's my favorite of all time. And when I had 200 followers on this thing, he had followed it. So it's like one of those things of like almost like having someone you look up to or you listen to their music forever almost like tell you, hey, I like what you're doing. And not that you need that, but it's almost like, okay, like if I have their almost trust in that and what I'm doing, then nothing, like I don't care. Like, if anything, it pulls more people that are alone with mental health or addiction. It makes them feel less alone. And that's more than anything that's going on with it. I don't care. I'm like, if even one person only which we knew was not going to happen, but if one person, that's all I cared about. And
Yeah.
just, yeah.
I love that for you. I listened to the episode you did with Anthony. I think it was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I stuck it on when I was like walking on the treadmill and listened. That guy is so genuinely awesome. I would
Oh,
love to rip a show with him and open for him someday. That'd be so cool.
yeah. So if you're somehow listening, Anthony, let's make this, because I think, yeah, that's the number one thing I also wanted people to get out of is how genuine, like, I'll go worse. I went in before. I had all these notes of what I was like, this is what I want it to look like. And I realized, like, no, just again, have it be genuine, sit down with them, and you can come up with something special versus tell me how your writing process is with this. Or, you know what I mean? Not to knock those people, but I was like, we can get something that can be impactful in mental health. And people that are fans of him will be like, hey, like he is so genuine. Or even if you're not a fan, like, okay, we need to protect him at all costs. And he is like just a genuine human. I mean, going on bigger podcasts and then my little one, like who am I
Yeah.
in that space, right? So it's like, yeah. But I mean, even you, I know a similar thing, sort of. I know you've gotten to work with Ace Enders of the early November. And I think for me, hearing too, and what I was doing a little research is one of your favorite or first songs you learned on the acoustic guitar was Ever So Sweet, or emo songs, whatever we want to call it. So which I love that song. I love the early November. But for you, how was that almost full circle for you to then get to work with Ace Enders and do that? That had to be so amazing.
Yeah. It's it's been pretty crazy. It was just I did a show one time and some guy from Baltimore was like, "Man, you sound like the early November." And I
Hmm.
was like, "That's crazy. I don't hear that at all, but thank you so much." I was like,
Hmm.
"Gosh, they're one of my favorite bands." And he had said something to me about reaching out to Ace like for some of my stuff and I was like, I didn't know how to get a hold of him.
Right.
And thankfully we hit it off and I kind of lucked out and he took me under his wing and I went to Jersey for, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 weeks of recording with him. And gosh, and me and him just hit it off like big time. And then I got to work with Jeff
Hmm.
Comer too. Like he came in and did some drums on a few of my songs, and Dylan Ray as well. Dylan played drums on one of my songs and played bass on a couple songs. But working with Ace was a huge step for me. Obviously, I had to put my fandom face away and
Hmm.
and it was really cool. He just taught me a lot. He taught me how to be a true pro and what I was doing. And I would say that one of the most valuable things I learned from him was to just listen. Put your listening ears on, and I was super thankful for that because I'm sure there's a lot of times where other bands or artists can work with bigger bands and things like that. But also at the same time, like you have to be willing to be super receptive, whether that's to criticism when you're in the studio and things like that. And Ace was so amazing at that because there was a lot of times, honestly, when we were recording where I felt like I was going to crumble, where
Hmm.
he was giving me some feedback on some things, and he was so sweet. he, he
Hmm.
would be like, dude, you're capable of this. Like, you're good at this. You can do this. And rather than just kind of putting me down and da 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 da, he kept lifting me up like he always seems to do with people. I can't speak enough good things about that guy. I am always going to be a huge Early November fan. They were one of my favorite emo bands and one of the first bands that I found in the early 2000s. But to be this full circle moment now and then having to go play with them,
Yeah.
my life is pretty much complete.
Yeah.
He's taught me a lot, and I'm super thankful for every lesson, every conversation, every text, every phone call, every moment that I got to work with him. I hope I get to do some more. That's for sure.
Oh, and I love hearing that because I always feel like I still feel the early November and Ace and just everything they've created. I feel like they didn't get enough flowers then and even
Yeah.
now. And I think it's a shame because I think of like that, oh gosh, I'm gonna draw a blank, that triple disc they did. It was like, I think The Mechanic,
Yep.
was it?
The mother, the mechanic, the path.
Yes, and that was I think about that alone and what they did and what they were able to do. So I love hearing that and as someone that's working with him about how great he is. So anyone listening, just go bump up the early November, go support because they were one of my first loves ever. And I think I love hearing that when people are genuine and you're able to learn, right? And taking criticism because that's such a real thing to be able to do and having someone like that say like, "Hey, I see this in you. You can do this." That has to be just like you said, like so motivating that like you can do it. You are capable. And I love hearing that. I love hearing stuff like that so much about people I listen to that are just genuine great people.
Yeah,
And
for sure. It's so crazy. I still picture myself sitting in my garage. I
mhm,
remember it like it was yesterday. I barely knew a few chords on guitar,
yeah.
and I remember figuring out Ever So Sweet and how cool it was that I was like playing it to a couple of my friends in the garage. And then fast forward years later when I kind of put my head down and started really trying hard with this stuff to make some meaningful art, being in the same room with him was just like crazy to me. I don't really have a whole lot of words for that because I'm just so thankful for it. But when I heard him say that a song that we did together was fantastic, it just melted my heart. And he's said that to me a couple times, which is awesome. I'm just blown away. We did a
Yeah.
really cool acoustic EP called Paint with Your Pain
Hmm.
together, and I just hit him up and I was like, "Hey, like I wrote these three songs. It's a concept. Um, all three songs are basically played the same, but I need them to fade into one another to where
Hmm.
it's like one big track, if you will. It's like a short story." And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I love everything about that. Like and it's acoustic. Like, let's go."
Yeah.
So, and we did it super raw, very little recording things. He basically just hooked me up to a guitar and a mic in a room, and then I cut a vocal, and I think he threw some bass on it or something. It was, far less processy from the producing side, I would say. And it turned out absolutely beautiful. It's like one of my favorite pieces of art. And it's also really cool too because when I'm playing with the full band, we don't typically play those songs. And then when I go out and play solo acoustic, I like to pull those out because people don't really get to hear them as often. And the response of it all is awesome. They're just like, "Oh, thank God you finally play this stuff," you know?
Yeah. I think there's such a place for acoustic songs and in just that, just how you're describing it. Like, I think there is such a place for it and so special Like, I think too, that has to change so much for you. You're playing with a band and then you do acoustic. And I think there's just something, at least for me as a music fan, about when I see anyone, just them and their guitar. And it's just a
Yeah.
special thing. And I think where the only thing I knock about acoustic shows, and it's not the artist, it is the audience. The audience sometimes is always talking during that, at least when I go to see
Mm.
shows. And I'm just like, would you shut up? Like I love the band City and Color. I love Dallas Green,
Oh,
everything he
yeah.
does. But it's hard for me to go see him play because every time I have and he's doing the acoustic and he's sitting there, everyone around me is just talking. And I'm
That
like,
drives me crazy.
it, I'm like, this is so special. You're seeing anyone up there with a good acoustic guitar, and it's such a special moment as a music listener and for the artist, I'm sure. And it's like, we're all talking. Why are we talking? So,
Yeah.
oh,
It's almost like being in a bar gig,
yes.
playing covers where you're just essentially background noise sometimes, unfortunately. Yeah, that tends to not be so much fun.
Yeah. Oh,
But
I,
it happens. It happens. What are you guys what are you gonna
right,
do, right?
right.
Tell the
Sleep.
people next to me, I'm like, hey, pipe down, man. I'm trying to get my feels.
Oh my gosh, like even when we saw Anthony Green at that Crossroads show that we recorded at, it was acoustic. And again,
Yeah.
you would think, hello, you paid money, you're here to see him. So many people talking during it around me. And I was just like, oh, just be quiet. Like you don't have to like tell them to be quiet. Like don't do that. Just try and zero in. But it
Yeah,
just,
you're
yeah,
right.
like ugh, stop it. But obviously, like I want to talk about Live, Laugh, Toaster Bath because one, I love that title.
Thank you.
And I'm
That's
like, this is
awesome.
so cool. Like it reminded me like even like the shirt and like the artwork I would see of it. I was like, it reminded me of like the Brave Little Toaster. And I'm
Mm,
like thinking back to it. I'm like, Live Laugh Toaster Bath. But so I know that's a one too you worked with obviously Ace and Jeff
yeah.
on as well. So what's been the response to this song? Because I love it. I'm like, even this morning, I'm like to get in the zone of us talking. I was like listening to it. I'm like, this just I love this. I just love, and I know you've said it's obviously about divorce, um, but it's it's so good.
Thank you. That's so awesome. I really appreciate that.
Hmm.
I love that song. I wrote it a while ago. It's a few years old, and I started just kind of throwing it in the set to play it at shows.
Hmm.
And my full band had learned it, and we started playing it and playing it. And then I put out like a live video, basically a nice video that I did with a videographer out of Baltimore, where we captured the audio and things with it. And then I got the audio of that and I threw it up on all the streaming platforms. So that way people could actually listen to it. Because it did end up resonating with some people, which was amazing.
Hmm.
And then while we booked some time with Ace, that was one of the songs that I wanted to cut full band just because it has a good amount of energy. And what's really cool about it is how much it is transformed when we play it live, as even opposed to what came out. Because, like, I'll just go to the bridge, for example. Everybody that comes to see me play now shouts that bridge at the top of their lungs. And
Hmm.
I didn't really hear that when I went to go into the recording process. So it didn't necessarily come out that way. It's similar, I should say, but it's not the exact same. So when we play it live, we tend to get the crowd involved with that and have them yell "feels like home." That is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen when I play live. I love that song very much. It's I have never been through a divorce, but I wrote it from an outside perspective, looking in on other people's things. That's just the creative side of me, if you will.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm super pumped on it. The response has been great. Cassie Podish did the art for that single. She's done a couple of them for me now. And yeah, we just did a really cool thing, a limited press for shirts for that song. I wasn't necessarily going to put merch out for that song, mainly just because it's so expensive. Merch is
Oh yeah.
unreal. But
Hmm.
I just kind of put a feeler out and I lucked out with Anthony of Capstan. Him and I hit it off, and he wanted to help me with some stuff too with merch. So I was like, I'll put a feeler out, and if people want to do it as a pre-order thing, then we'll make it happen. And I believe I did like 36 shirts in like not even a day. So
Wow.
that was amazing. I was super
Mhm.
pumped on that, and I'm excited to see how they turn out and see everybody wearing them at shows. It's pretty cool. And the people that ordered them are from all over the country, which was just amazing. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily my hometown. It was people from all over. They wanted to get their hands on something, and I'm just super thankful for that. That's incredible.
Yeah, and even talking and hearing you say that about the crowd, that's one thing I've noticed when I was looking at like the Instagram and TikTok scope of things. And obviously, I've never been able to see you play, but you get that sense of like the people are into it. They are singing back to you and the energy. I'm like, it brings me back to going to those VFWs and things of that
Yes.
nature and seeing that I'm like this is so cool to see that this still does exist. So if someone is, a lot of times people will look at old videos, I think, of like say Blink 182, and then they'll see these old videos of people playing, oh, I wish I was there. Well, you can be like the artist like you can go scope it out. You can be those people in old videos to come and say I was there. So I love
Yep.
to see your crowd response. I'm like, this is so cool to see people just so into it because I think you recently played with the band Roderick. And I've
Yes.
had them on, and I saw them. They take a picture of the crowd and this and that. I'm like, this is just so cool. Like I'm just so happy that that exists, and there are people that are going to shows like yours and supporting that and supporting you. Most of all, like in all that. I think it's just so special.
Yeah, the Roderick Boys are awesome. We've been trying to get a
Mhm.
show together for a while, and the last Baltimore show that I set that one up. I wanted to have them come down and play. That was really cool. And those guys are fantastic live. They're amazing. But I'm all about the liveness of what I do. I'm actually I'm always learning. I'll never stop learning how to be better in the studio.
Mhm.
But to me, I am just all about getting people involved, lifting some people up, making people smile,
Mhm.
and I want them to feel everything at a show or maybe nothing at all, whatever, they're going through. This is like a teamwork thing to me. I'm very connected with the people that support my music. I love everything about a DIY music scene.
Mhm.
I've been going to those VFW shows and church grain shows for
Mhm.
years and years and years and years. And I saw huge bands in those shows.
Yeah.
I remember seeing A Day to Remember in a church grange to like 50 people back in the day and telling all my friends that, hey, this band is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And then, a couple years later, they get a bunch of popularity and they're like, man, have you heard this band? I'm like, dude, I told you about this band,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh.
And it was the same thing for a lot of other bands too. Man, the list goes on and on. I've seen so many like early on in their career because I'm a music person. I
Mhm.
always seek new music. And now in the streaming era of things, I don't care about how many monthly listeners somebody has. If I'm being 100% transparent, I
Mhm.
think it's kind of a vanity score. That's what I like to
Mhm.
call it. Some of my favorite bands and artists don't have that many followers on that stuff,
Yeah.
and their art is so precious. It's so amazing. They're so talented. Their message hits home in so many ways, and I the thing about having streaming platforms is absolutely fantastic for somebody to just be able to run and listen to your song, but also at the same time, um, and I preach this to other people too. I'm like, don't let that bother you, man. Like, don't let that stop you from creating or
Yeah.
thinking that your art is not as good as other people's. Don't even compare. That's just silly, anyways. And I've found myself in the same realm. It's hard. It's really hard. If you put a lot of love into a song and it doesn't do what you want it to do, well, it does hurt.
Yeah.
It's a real feeling, and it happens. I've had it happen multiple times, and I'm sure it's going to happen more times, going forward. But at the same time, it's like, man, if you have one person tell you that something you did was fantastic, or they related to it in a certain way, made them feel this way, you won. You literally won.
Mhm.
That's what you set out to do. If you feel like your purpose is lifting others up through the music that you're writing and the stories that you're telling, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whatever, people are thankful for that. And I take it back to myself in the beginning where I was listening to those bands that didn't have big followings and stuff. And I'm like, I found this stuff because I actively searched for it and I
Mhm.
clung to it. because their message resonates, right? Like
Hmm.
that's what music's all about.
I
I
love.
don't care about the huge following, the huge popularity. Now, is that stuff cool? Absolutely.
Right.
Very cool. And it's something to be very proud of if you get to that point. But also at the same time, I don't for myself too, like I don't want it to ever beat me down and make me feel like what I'm doing is not worthy.
Like, is Instagram going to let me clip that? No, they give me a 1 minute and 30 seconds because that is like people need to hear that. And I think that when we talk even about mental health, right, that can deeply affect your mental health, I'm sure, as an artist, that again, you put so much into it. And for whatever reason, maybe it doesn't do as well. But I agree that if you hear one person, there's so many bands that I love that I know are not either everyone's favorite, the biggest numbers if you go look on Spotify. But for me, it's what helped me. And like it's one of those things that I can resonate with and it's so special. And to me, I can say, oh, like that's so important. And I don't know how they feel, right? Because they could feel, well, no one's listening because of these numbers. But I think it all
Right.
goes back to what you're saying too, like that community, like, and you see that in you and what you even post, if you post on a reel, like to keep going. And I think it's so important to have people like you on there because as cheesy as some people may be like, oh, keep going, like sometimes when you're going through it, that's not cheesy at all. Like when I'm really going through it, if I see that and I'm flipping through, that can change my day around, my perspective around of like, you can get through this. You have gotten through this. If they did, okay, well, let me look at myself. I can get through this too. And I think that's so important to have messages out there like that. And just like we were talking about earlier, you never know who's going to see that. And maybe someone needs to see that. So again, like you can truly see that you are walking that walk with community and creating a community.
I appreciate it. Yeah, keep going has become a mantra for me because I'm horrible with my mental health as well as
Yeah.
many are, and it was just something that got adapted into me when I was racing professional motocross, and I was going through a lot of really hard times with that, and I just kept telling myself, keep going. It
Hmm.
was it does sound cheesy, maybe it is, but sometimes the little things pay big dividends, right?
Yeah.
I'll take it, whatever it takes. And I tell people that all the time. I say, whatever it takes. Some of the happiest people on their faces are, miserable deep down
Yeah.
inside with themselves. And I just want to be whatever kind of guiding light that I can be because other people do that for me. And I think it's more so like just passing it along and using my platform, if you will, my music to be a guiding light for somebody else. I'm really proud of that. And for trying to uplift people. It's hard because sometimes you're the one that needs uplifting, right?
Hmm.
And that's really hard because I've my whole entire life I've been that strong man, raised by a father that's like, "Hey dude, we don't cry, like we work our asses off and we get after it." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"All right, that's all I know."
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older and been through countless therapy myself, which was very hard for me. And I encourage anybody to do that. It's as hard and as scary as it is. It helped me tremendously. And now I'm like a big crybaby,
Hmm.
and I'm proud of that. I really am. Like I'm super proud of that. I used to just be this like tough emotional guy because I went through so much
Hmm.
growing up and things that I just felt like that was who I became. And unfortunately, it got sour in my relationships, my friendships, and even my own mental health. I didn't know how to just let myself feel. I didn't know how to keep going myself. Like I had no idea. So I would go out and get hammered drunk, with my friends and then get the anxiety effect where you're anxious and don't even know why and
Hmm.
all that stupid stuff. And yeah, again, I just want to be a positive influence on somebody's life and maybe for someone that they don't want maybe they're going through a bad relationship or a breakup or something, and I put a song out and it hit home for them, and they just don't want to feel anything at that point in time. Well, sometimes you need that,
Hmm.
And but at the end of the day, it's very important to just brush yourself off and cling to the positivity that other people provide, music, whatever it takes. Again, whether it's the gym, songs, walking, hanging out with your dogs, friends, whatever it takes. You just got to keep going.
Thank you for sharing all that because I'm sure anyone that comes on here, I know mental health, even in my own life. Like I know I always tell people just because we have a music and mental health podcast doesn't mean I have it all figured out. There's times like you were saying where I'm, maybe the other person, maybe you need that lifting up. And it's one of those things of like, there's times where I'm going through it and I'm like, oh man, I got to get on here and talk about mental health. Like, and I'm always transparent of like, hey, I'm going through this. And I think even I know one of the things I'm always most proud of is the amount of male guests that we get on here that express what you just said, where you're always taught, and it was a different time, a different generation. Like my parents were the
Yeah.
same way, even with me as a girl, right? Like, hey, suck it up. Like I've been through this and I love my parents. I love my mom, but it was one of those things where I wish I didn't do that and sucked it up
Mm.
because that caused a lot of problems for me as a teenager, as in my early 20s and like now in my 30s, finally recognizing those things and working through those things and figuring out those things. But it's like, man, I wish when I was going through those certain things that I wasn't taught to do that and suppress it and just move along. And you're strong if you like move on, but like I wish we were taught like, hey, no, you're strong if you're like, hey, I need help. I need to go do this, or I need to go seek out. This is what I'm going through, and this does matter because it's caused tremendous problems with me early on. Like you said, even relationships. It was a
Yeah.
big thing. And had I just maybe worked on it and recognized it or could, or had the tools,
Yes.
it would have helped tremendously. And I know so many other people probably feel that same way. And it's like, man, I'm glad we're making strides in mental health, but I know where there's still a way to go. But yeah, hearing you say things like that, it's like, again, like I know I'm not alone in that because that was like, even as a girl, hearing that out of my parents of like, you got to toughen up, just keep going. And like, you're going to get
Yeah.
through this. I'm like, like I love you guys, but like right now I'm really going through it. And yeah, just we need more of that. We need more people knowing too that it's okay to talk about those things.
Yeah, there is some really cool stuff throughout social medias that I've seen over the years that have been super helpful as, kind of breaking the stigma, if you will. And I can kind of only speak on men for this just
Hmm.
because um, I relate to it.
Yeah.
It was very challenging to be an open book, be vulnerable, and sometimes it still is. But also at the same time, I do feel like it's your responsibility to break that. Um, and unfortunately for me, is I had to learn it through relationships
Hmm.
where it was like you don't ever talk, like you go and just close off and you never communicate, blah blah blah. And me, I would just shut off and be like, all
Hmm.
right, well, forget you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just wrong. That's wrong on so many levels. And I'm really thankful that I did recognize that and that I can push forward and work on that stuff. And it's challenging and it's always something you have to work on, I think, for the rest of your life. It's you never stop, but you can't be closed off to where you're not learning because if you're not willing to learn, you're never going to change your behavior, and that's obviously a problem. And you don't want that. You want to be able to progress and figure things out for yourself and give yourself a reason to smile.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so important to find those reasons to smile, right? Whether it is getting your favorite coffee or seeing a favorite band, like or whatever it is, having those reasons to smile, at least for me, have always helped me like through anything and going through it.
Whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think I know some people might be like, oh, it's easier said than done, but there's always a way, at least for me, and I've gone through so much in the last 4 years personally, with my fiance and like an accident he had as a electric alignment
Oh wow.
apprentice. Yeah. And
I'm an electrician too, so that hits
oh
home.
yeah, so he 4 years ago, he was an apprentice, and so obviously he's low on the pole of jobs and this and that of basically do what you're told. So you can maybe resonate with that and in that.
Yeah.
And so 4 years ago, working here on the Parkway, him being an apprentice, he's not gonna say anything. He's gonna, okay, like I gotta do this. So he ended up getting severely electrical burned, basically was out because the electrical there wasn't the right matting or this and that. Basically, they did something and he was hit with like 36,000 volts of electricity. And from being you had CPR being used. He then
Hmm.
was airlifted to Philadelphia, the burn center. We spent 40 days there. I mean, he lost fingers and toes and skin grafts
Wow.
all around him. And just going through that and the recovery. And then, of course, then we faced, which is why I was really glad that Anthony brought that up about there's no withdrawal protocols because he was then prescribed Oxy, which led us down a
Hmm.
different path to, right? Then not only the recovery of physical and mental health, but then getting through those withdrawals and doctors that want to prescribe this and that all the time. And I think going through those 4 years, I always would cling to finding like a way, something to smile about, whether it's like the little squirrels I feed outside that brought me so much joy and helped my mental health. And
Yeah.
it's like things like that, always finding things to smile. And like, I always tell people that like those 4 years were the hardest 4 years ever. And, for him in ways, for us as a couple, my mental health, because I put that on the back burner because I'm like, oh, well, I have to be there for him. But then that caused, again, a tremendous downfall that didn't need to be there. But it's finding ways to smile even in that stuff. Like if someone brought me a cup of coffee or like, hey, go shower even, give me time to shower. Reasons to smile, like people just don't realize how important that is to find that in tough times.
Yeah, man, I agree. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear about that.
Oh,
That's awful. I've
yeah.
heard those stories before, in my line of work. I hate
Mm-hmm.
hearing that.
Yeah.
It can be a very dangerous job doing
Yeah.
electrical stuff, especially as a lineman. Yeah, that's awful. That's a
It's
lot
what,
of weight to carry for, your partner or whatever. That's a lot of weight to carry
oh yeah.
sometimes when you have to flip directions. I'll even tell you a little bit of story if that's cool.
Yeah.
I used to race professional motocross, like I
Mm-hmm.
said. So I was a pro dirt bike racer before I really dove into music. And I had a lot of injuries over the years, a lot of broken bones, a lot of surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of went on that same path. I got pretty banged up in a crash and compound fractured arms and did all kinds of crazy stuff. Had to have a lot of surgeries in my hands to put them back together, plates and screws and all the good stuff. And the same kind of story. They give you a
Yeah.
bunch of pain pills,
Mm-hmm.
and I lost my mom to addiction from that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very real thing for me, and that's again why I talk about my mental health and try to help other people. But I noticed that during the recovery process of that, I was starting to take too much of that stuff, and then I was drinking a beer on top of it just to.
Yes.
And then it got to the point where I didn't necessarily even have pain anymore. I was plated and all that stuff from my surgeries, but I wasn't necessarily in pain a month after having the surgeries and stuff like that. I was just
Mm-hmm.
pretty much feeling down on myself because I couldn't do what I loved. I missed it dearly, and I was just chasing a high, if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize it. I just kind of fell into it and just never really had time to like reflect on it. And then I told my dad, I was like, "You got to get these things away from me, dude. I'm better than that. I'm not going down this freaking path."
Yeah.
It it terrified me, if I'm being honest, because I know the addiction gene is with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very I'm very driven with everything that I do and have a ton of passion for almost everything that I do. So when I get fixated on something, I run for it and I hustle and I work really hard. And then when I got hurt, the last time that I was racing, this was 2020, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing everything and anything to get back to what I was, paid to do essentially is race a motorcycle. And when I started to go off that path and I got scared, I just got terrified. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not living my life like that. I'm better than that. I don't want to say that I was like addicted by any means because I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to rob somebody else's story or whatever. But I definitely saw the signs and I was like, can't do that. And
Yeah.
thankfully, my dad took all that stuff away from me. And I remember the next couple of days feeling like absolute hell. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that's crazy. I didn't think I had a problem with that stuff by any means, but I had been taking them for an extended period of time, started taking more.
Mm-hmm.
And when you took it away, I was irritable. I was miserable. I
Yes.
wanted it for no reason. And I was like, okay, that's some pretty serious stuff. I'm gonna stay
Yeah.
away from that.
Yeah. Oh, and again, thank you for sharing that because I'm sure that's such a personal thing. And I could resonate so much with what I need, what obviously didn't happen to me, but with my fiance, everything you said, where if it was taken away, there would be a mood or this and that,
Oh
or
yeah,
oh, okay. And again, with the drinks, oh, a drink with that and this and that. And it was 3 years after that. And yes, he has extensive nerve pain, never take that away from him. But
sure.
the way the doctors are prescribing, and in my mind, it was, yeah, like again, like he always doesn't like to say that. And oh, he was addicted because again, to take away from someone else's story, but the signs were there. Everything you just described, I'm like, that's what we dealt with. That's what we were going through. And I think that's a problem in itself. You go through a tragic accident, that's one thing in itself. And then you get this medication. And then again, if you have the addiction gene or you just, I guess, the terminology, some people say, oh, the addictive personality, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah,
you're
100%. That's
you're
exactly how I am.
you're in these I can't imagine. And it's like I think again just the way we treat people that are going through that too. And I just, yeah, just mental health and that go so much in hand because I just I just feel for everybody after going through what we went through. I'm sure after going through what you went through and able to overcome. And I think, and I mean, I can't imagine losing a parent to that and then going through something and just, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because again, like
Of course.
I would imagine that's not an easy thing to ever to say, right? But I'm sure someone can resonate and I've been there. I've dealt
Sure.
with that. And hearing someone overcome that is huge. And I think, yeah, just
Yeah, I
wow.
mean, again, I try to be an open book for that kind of stuff nowadays. I never talked about that when I was younger, mainly because I felt ashamed.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people go through that. That's a really valid feeling for a lot of folks. I was very ashamed when I was a young kid when my mother was going through that and not necessarily being a great mom.
Hmm.
Um, but it was like Jekyll and Hyde too for her, which I empathized deeply with, was because when she wasn't on that stuff, she was incredible. She was an awesome mom, but she couldn't get away from it and then had, clarity for quite some time where she was sober and everything was great. And then obviously it just came back into her life and she couldn't kick it. And that's super unfortunate, obviously. But I will say that the silver lining to that is it taught me deeply how to recognize, especially for myself, my friends, family, whatever. When I see that behavior, I know, like, I just know that what's happening, where I need to, if I need to pull away and get away from those people, um, and when I need to say, hey, and address them.
Hmm.
And that's difficult too, right? I've had to have that conversations with friends,
Hmm.
um, and things of that nature, which I know a lot of people have. It's it's difficult. It's very, very challenging to confront somebody, especially one that you love, that they might be doing a little too much pleasurable, fun things.
Hmm.
Um, but I can promise you that it's not, you're just kind of disconnecting from who you are. You're chasing something that makes you feel more socially acceptable, I guess, kind of like
Hmm.
drinking does a lot of the
Yeah.
time, which can be extremely toxic as well. And I drink, I drink all the time with my friends and stuff, but I have that image always planted in my head because my mom was an alcoholic of when I go on like a couple days of drinking with my friends and stuff, I get extremely anxious. I don't go to the gym. I sleep like crap.
Yeah.
My mental health for I could have great things in my life, but for some reason my mental health feels terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I need to go back and sit with myself a little bit and get myself right. That stuff's fine to enjoy. However, I see signs of me not taking care of me, and I don't like that. I won't I won't write music. I won't go to the gym. I won't be there as a good partner for my fiance. Like I won't do any
Mm-hmm.
of the things that are extremely necessary. So again, I always get kind of scared. If I'm being honest, I think it's just like a scared thing
Mm-hmm.
that I don't want to fall into that trap because I am very regimented. I love to write almost every single day of some sort. I feel very accomplished, whether that's sending one email to somebody that, you know, it might be a networking thing or just saying hi to whether it's a promoter, a venue, an artist, whatever. And when that stuff gets taken away from me, I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing my job, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Yeah.
giving my best effort. I'm not putting my best foot forward in my endeavors. And for something that I love so much, like my music, I don't want that to be taken away from me because when I got hurt years ago and I couldn't use my hands, when I thought about not being able to play a guitar, it was a really real thing at the time and it terrified me to death. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I can still go play music and sing and do all those things, I'm just so thankful, so thankful.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we all are because again, I do appreciate you as an artist and being able to one speak about these things, but put it into your music and real. I love, like I said, I love hearing real things that we can relate to. Not that the fun stuff isn't like, all right, sometimes, putting a little like, I don't know, Sabrina Carpenter or whatever the biggest sometimes putting that stuff on isn't great or like isn't fun. And I'm not saying like I don't like, oh, bob my head to it, but it's like when you have real music that you can connect to and hear like, hey, they've been through something or they're writing and like say they were like with, when you were saying you didn't go through a divorce, but you were able to tap into that creatively. So someone that maybe has gone through that, they're able to resonate with that and they hear that. And that's like something like you can't teach that in my opinion. Like I'm not a musician, but I feel like you can't teach that. It's just in you. And this has just been so great and I appreciate you so much and I everything you shared, I know so many will resonate with it and I hope this pushes people to you and to be like check him out, see what he's doing. So before I let you go, I would love to know, I know I'll post all the links. I know you're on social media, but if anyone wants to listen, where can people find you and your music?
It's available everywhere. It's Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, YouTube Music, all those good things. There's a million other platforms that I'm not really too aware of, but it's probably
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm sure. Even when I look at people's, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's here, but does anyone use that? I don't know. I'll link it. I'll put it. But yeah, I appreciate you so much, and I'm thankful that you took time for me and you wanted to come on here and playing some shows soon too at the end of the month as
Yeah.
well. So hopefully someone here, maybe in Jersey, it's not that far. We can make the trek. I know you're actually playing. I think is it Butler and Butler.
Yes.
So yeah, so I mean, someone around here or anyone in the surrounding areas can probably hopefully go see you play.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be running to New York, Buffalo, Butler, New Jersey, and then Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And then in March, I'm going to go down south and then do like Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and up. And then I'm going to end the show back at home, which is going to be fun. I haven't played at home in quite a while, so that's going to be awesome. And I
Oh,
got a new song next week, next Wednesday dropping called Hallways that I did with Ascenders. I'm really
awesome.
excited for that.
Oh, awesome. And again, I love to hear like that Ascenders and you are in the same orbit and you're doing this cool stuff. As someone, like I said, coming off of what I did with Anthony, that feeling, you carry that with you and it's so amazing. And I love to see you continue to work with him. And I think that speaks volumes too, to like his respect even for you, right? Like I know you have a lot of respect for him, but I love to hear that and I can't wait to hear it for sure.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate it so much. Thankful for every opportunity, I promise.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
great
oh.
chatting with you.
And all right, guys, that was my conversation with Gabe. Again, all links below if you want to find Gabe. I want you guys to go discover him. I think what Gabe is doing is really, really cool. I love when there's an authentic musician and you can just tell that and what they're speaking about. And I really hope You guys go check him out. All links below for all the socials. I also, again, want to thank Gabe for being so open in his mental health and everything he said. Go stream Hallways. I'm going to link that one. That was a song that just came out after we had recorded. It is featuring Ascenders, who we talk about, and I think a lot of you guys will like it. As for our show, if you are enjoying this thing even just a little bit, be sure to follow us and subscribe. It's an easy way to support an independent podcast like ours. It means a lot in a positive rating and review. Every show says it, and I think it's for good reason. We will be back next week with a brand new conversation, and I can't wait to share that one as well. Hopefully you guys are listening to some good music, trying to get through whatever it is that you may be going through. I know right now a lot of people are going through a lot, and I want to recognize that. And if the show is a distraction for anything you're going through, I am so honored that that is, and that you guys are listening and finding comfort in a podcast, whether it's mine or someone else's. I just hope everyone's doing okay, and we will see you guys next time. All right, bye guys.